ACC basketball delivered this week with some awesome games, great content that really rivals a college football Saturday. Obviously, North Carolina is upset over Duke in what I think is a top 4 rivalry in all of sports. Takes the cake, and we'll talk about that. But as we always do, let's start at the bottom and work our way up the conference. And at the bottom, it's still Pittsburgh. They were blown out by both Virginia and SMU this week. And look, those teams are, you don't want to be losing or getting blown out, but those are good teams. Those are tournament teams. So I'm not really knocking them for losing those games, but they weren't competitive. They've lost 9 out of 11, and they're 9-15. I think this is probably decisively the worst team in the ACC. Jeff Capel's really let them really flounder to the very bottom. It's surprising. Above them at 17, I have Boston College. They've now lost 4 straight, including a blowout to Duke, but they were competitive this week against Miami, gave them a little bit of a scare. They were competitive last week against Virginia and Notre Dame. At least they're not an easy out right now. And then Georgia Tech, they went out west with Clemson. Clemson won both games. They lost both games. I think these 3 are your favorites to not make the ACC tournament. Please subscribe to this channel. Please hype this video if you can, and please like it. It really helps a lot. I'd appreciate that. All right. Right there with them is Notre Dame. Notre Dame also 2-9. They're losers of 9 out of 10. They've been abysmal without Marcus Burton. And frankly, I don't think, one really good scorer, but he's still one player, can really be the difference between, 2-9 and 9-2. I think this is unacceptable. I think Notre Dame basketball is in a bad spot. They were bad the very last year of Mike Bray, and now all 3 years under Shrewsbury. I don't know how long you put up with this. Maybe they're just a football school and they don't care, but I don't take that to be. I don't assume that. 14 is Wake Forest, kind of a similar situation. They've lost their 5th straight game. This one was a loss to Louisville. Again, losing to Louisville is not the worst thing in the world, but they're below 500 at 11-12, and they don't seem to be making progress as a program. And as quick as you see people like Jay Lucas turn around at Miami. Or Ryan Odom, even better example, turn around Virginia. How long do you stick with Forbes there? Then at 13, we have Syracuse. Ken Palm still likes them. They have them 69th, so they don't think they're terrible. But they had double-digit losses to North Carolina, Virginia this week, which, again, isn't that bad. But you're Syracuse. This is your sport. This is where you're supposed to be good at, and they're just not that good. And then at 12, Florida State. Florida State is really not on the bubble. They had such a bad start to the year, but they're playing much better of late. They just beat Notre Dame this week, and they're pretty dangerous. And notably, Chauncey Wiggins, the Clemson transfer, who was really kind of, and I'll say it, he was soft at Clemson. He'd shoot the 3, but for his size, it's 6'10", could not rebound with a lick. Well, he's really improved at Florida State. He's only getting not even 4 minutes more of playing time. So it's not just he's playing more. He actually got a chance to start at Clemson for most of the year. And his 3-point shooting, it's not even that his 3-point shooting is way better because it's actually slightly down. But he's doing more inside. He's up a rebound from last year's average. He's down on turnovers. He's up on assists. His field goal percentage from 2 is up. He's not playing so soft. It's a little frustrating that he couldn't do this at Clemson. 3 years at Clemson, he averaged 2.4, 5.4, and 8.3 points, and now he jumps all the way to 12.9. He's been on a heater scoring, averaging over 20 points over their last 3 games where they've played quite well. So kudos to Florida State and turning this around. I think they're done in terms of making the NCAA tournament. I think that went out the window a long time ago, but I think they're going to be a spoiler down the stretch. And, you'd hope you've already played them because they're playing good basketball right now. Here's the teams that are probably on the outside. They're looking in. They're not dead yet, but they're kind of on the cusp. Stanford survived. They beat Georgia Tech. They lost to Clemson this week. So now their hopes are really hanging on a thread here. And I'm going to pull up their schedule. They've got not as many kind of big opportunities upcoming, so they really can't afford to lose. They lost 5 in a row, with the Clemson loss being their 5th. That was a great game. I thought Stanford looked really good in that one. And then they beat Georgia Tech by 23 points, really took it to them. And Ibuka Okori had 40 points. Georgia Tech had no answer. Georgia Tech often has no answer, but still that's really impressive. Now, here's where things are interesting. Stanford is 77 in KenPom. They're 15-9. They've got to rattle off some wins. They get that chance, though, because up next, they beat Georgia Tech. Now they go to Boston College and to Wake Forest. If you're going to go 2-0 on a road swing week, that's your chance to do it. Then they get the week off and they go to nearby Cal. They lost to them at home. They got to go get that road win. You pick up those three straight road wins, you're back alive playing Pittsburgh. That's a must win. You can't take that bad loss. And then it's SMU, Notre Dame, NC State. You need to win 2 out of 3. You're probably not winning at Raleigh. All that means they've got to win 6 straight games before the game at Raleigh. If they, barring a huge upset in Raleigh against NC State, they've got to win 6 straight. So they are on life support now. Then above them, Cal. Cal also split, again, beating Georgia Tech and losing to Clemson. Their situation's not quite as dire, but it's close. They go to Syracuse and Boston College. Definitely need to win both of those. Then they host Stanford. They've already beat Stanford once. Now they get them at home. And then they get SMU. SMU is really their last chance for another big marquee win. They have a win over Miami. They have a win over North Carolina. They have a win over UCLA. Cal's in a better spot because some of their wins are a little bit more impressive than Stanford. So if they could rattle off 4 straight wins and add that SMU win, they could be in an okay spot. So I don't think they have to win 6 in a row, but maybe 6 of 7 or at least 5 of 7. They've got, I think, a better shot than Stanford. And then Virginia Tech, they don't have a lot of bad losses. In fact, their worst loss is probably their home loss to Stanford. Not a lot of great wins. If I'm looking by KenPom, they beat number 80 George Mason. Oh, they have the Virginia triple overtime win, of course. How could I forget? That's their one great win they could hang their hat on. Perhaps Cal, but really at Syracuse, so not a lot. They get some chances, though. Wednesday, they're at Clemson. That's pretty close to a must-win. If they don't win that, they're going to have to beat Miami and probably Virginia, too, to really add something to the resume. They're 5-6 in the ACC. They're not dead, but again, kind of that's the sort of the life support section. All right, all 8 of these teams are comfortably in right now. Miami is going to be a little interesting, though. So Miami doesn't really have any great. Miami's best wins are road wins at Ole Miss, who's number 67 in KenPom, and Syracuse, who's 69. So not the greatest. They don't have kind of a marquee, memorable victory. Now they're not losing to teams they shouldn't, but you got to get some of those quad 1 wins, and they just don't have much. That's going to change, though. Their schedule is quite backloaded. So we're going to see if they're for real. They they host North Carolina on Tuesday, then go to NC State. Then the next week, they host Virginia Tech and go to Virginia. We're going to find out how real this Miami team is. If they go 0-4, they're probably not making the tournament. If they could just split those, I think they're solidly in. They're 7-3. They've got a good record, but the back half of the schedule is gnarly. They've got those 4. And then they got Florida State, Boston College, which is a little bit easier. But then they have SMU and Louisville to finish. So really brutal stretch to finish. If Miami could even be, just a little bit, maybe slightly above 500 in these last couple, they've got 8 games. If they can go 4-4 and finish 11-7, I think you're pretty happy. If you can go 5-3, they're solidly in and in a good spot. So just really tough finish there for Miami. Above them is SMU, and SMU, they do have that great win against UNC, which has aged really well for them. This week, they lost what was really a great game against NC State, and then they really just clobbered a bad Pitt team. I'll talk about more about that NC State game when we get to NC State. I thought SMU looked good. I really like Boobie Miller. I really like Igatolu, their center. I think they're a good team. They just maybe don't have the depth of like a Clemson or an NC State. So there's a hair behind them. They do have that one good win against North Carolina. Probably need to pick up they're only 5-5, and yet they're 7 in the power rankings. I think they could pick up some wins here, the bottom of or the end of the ACC schedule. And then Louisville. Louisville drops. I had them at 3 last week. They're down to 6. They did nothing wrong. They don't deserve to drop, but other teams just deserve to rise. This week, they took care of business. They went 2-0. Let me pull that up here. They took care of business in a 11-point win over Notre Dame and an 8-point win over Wake Forest. Both perfectly respectable wins. What else are they supposed to do? But Louisville needs need some more good wins. They do have that nice win from last week over SMU. They've got a home win over Virginia Tech. But beyond that, it's been a while since they beat Kentucky, which is really their marquee win, or Indiana. Those are probably their two marquee wins, both coming in the non-con. This week, things change. They have the Monday game at home against NC State. Obviously, if they beat NC State, they're going to jump back and leapfrog NC State, who leapfrogged them this week. Then they go and they have one of these late non-conference games that are getting popular. They'll play Baylor, who's 44 in Ken Palm, before they get SMU again. So Louisville's got some opportunities here with some meat on the bone upcoming in their schedule. I think they're good, but at a certain point, you're 7-4. The teams above you have better records and have just been looking really good lately. So it's more kudos to the teams above them than a knock on Louisville for falling down. I think Louisville's very solidly in the tournament. I think they can win a tournament game. I think they're good, but these other teams deserve praise. All right, now we're talking Clemson. Clemson is at number 5. And check this out. This is from Evan Maya, who's kind of a Ken Palm alternative. Very good. Actually sent this to me. So thank you, Evan Maya, for sending this my way. Because it's interesting. If you look at Clemson down there at the very bottom, the lower you are, the more consistent. So you can see NC State towards the very top, dangerous but volatile. They're not that consistent, which makes sense because NC State is a jump shooting team, and they're an elite jump shooting team. I think they're very good. But when you rely on the jump shot, sometimes you're going to have cold nights. Clemson, more post-oriented and defense-oriented especially, defense travels. That's why Clemson has the longest or tied for the second longest road win streak in conference history at 14. They picked up 2 road wins at Stanford, at Cal. It's really, really impressive to be that mature, that focused. Stanford played really well. Clemson managed the storm late in the game. They missed Clemson missed some big free throws, but clamped down on defense. Was fortunate that Stanford also missed some big free throws, and Clemson comes out on top. Then they just utterly smother and dominate Cal defensively. Cal could not do anything in the first half on offense. A little bit of cold shooting, but mostly they just didn't get good shot opportunities. They finished with 55 points. And, Clemson, they were up 20 or so. Cal started making a slight run, got it down to 15, felt like here we go again. But then Clemson pushed it all the way out to 24, and the game was over at that point. Really impressive. Jake Wallin made his shots. In the post, Carter Welling was really good. RJ Godfrey was really good. That was a true game where basically everyone scored. In this case, one exception being Dylan Hunter, who got in foul trouble. But Ace Buckner was great, playing more minutes because of Dylan Hunter's foul trouble. Just a true, the strength of the team is the team. Clemson's an elite defensive team that gets it done on offense. And you see here just super consistent. Now, they don't have the upside, right? They're not quite as far to the right or as high to have that kind of game where they go and beat Duke. But that's what they're going to be tasked with doing this week as they host Virginia Tech on a weekday game on Wednesday. And then they'll go to Cameron Indoor, where they haven't won since the 90s. I don't know if they have the upside to knock off a team quite like that. But unlike UNC, they're also not going to drop games to Stanford and Cal in their West Coast swing. They're probably a higher floor, lower ceiling than a UNC. If they could beat Duke, then I'll take it all back, and Clemson's going to be number 1 in power rankings next week if they go 2-0 this week. This is a tough week. The schedule's kind of backloaded for Clemson with Virginia Tech and then Duke on the road. That's super tough. But even after that, it's still pretty tough for Clemson. They get Wake Forest on the road, Florida State, who's now playing pretty good at home. Then they get Louisville at home and North Carolina in the Dean Dome before they close with an easier game at home, Georgia Tech. So it's a tough stretch of 6 games here for Clemson upcoming. We'll see how they survive. They're 10-1. They are first place in the ACC, tied with Duke, but it is a fact to say Clemson is in first place in the ACC, and now their schedule ramps up. If they could finish, 15-3, that'd be unbelievable. Even if they finish 14-4, this team is I think an NCAA tournament lock, and now it's about seeding, and they've got some opportunities here for those marquee wins. I think they're 2-3 in quad 1. Should be able to pick up another quad 1 win. So really, really impressive for Clemson. I think Brad Brownell deserves Coach of the Year. All respect to Ryan Odom, who should also be in the running, but for him to lose everyone and somehow this team gets better, they don't have a star player, they don't have a superstar like DeRitter for Virginia, and to do what they do with consistency is incredibly impressive. So huge kudos to Clemson. But even with that, I dropped Clemson 1 spot because NC State and UNC just deserve to move up. Before I get to them, Virginia, I know I have a lot of Virginia fans who watch this, and thank you if you're one of them. I appreciate it. As always, hype this video, like this video, and subscribe to the channel. And also it's always cool to hear what fan bases are watching this. I've heard a lot from Virginia. Last week I heard that I didn't talk about NC State enough, so I'm going to talk about them a little bit more. Let me know who's your team. I'll try to make sure I give them enough attention. Virginia this week, I mean, what is there to say? They took care of business against kind of lesser opponents. Again, nothing they did wrong to drop. It's just some of these teams kind of deserve to be ahead of them. And so Virginia took care of business against Pitt and Syracuse, but Pitt and Syracuse just not that good. Whereas NC State was a little bit more impressive. NC State, I watched their full SMU game, and I'm just so blown away by Quadir Copeland. You know, I saw him at McNeese, thought he was okay. I saw him when he played against Clemson earlier this year and thought he was okay. But since then, Copeland has become kind of a star. And this is an unfair comp, but it's kind of that tall point guard like Magic Johnson who could drive. He's got athleticism, but he's looking to pass. Against SMU, 16 assists to 0 turnovers. Absolutely bonkers. His offensive rating is 123.9, which is crazy. Last couple of games, it was 16 assists, 0 turnovers against SMU. Then they beat Virginia Tech, and I thought Virginia Tech played well. They're kind of like Clemson, like maybe a diet Clemson. And they're not quite as good, but they're very consistent and solid. But they don't shoot like NC State. NC State just kind of shot them out of the gym. And it's basically Quadir Copeland surrounded by elite shooters. Copeland had 10 assists and 21 points in the win over Virginia Tech. I'm just so blown away that Quadir Copeland's become such a good player, such a good distributor. NC State is now 21 in offensive efficiency. They're 24 overall ranking in KenPom, and their 3-point percentage is up to 6th nationally, 40.2% from 3. There's just such a good shooting team. Teams above them, Yale, St. Louis, Belmont, Iowa State, Tulsa, NC State. So of like Power 5 teams, only Iowa State shoots better than NC State. Early in the year, I tend to be skeptical of teams that rely on threes and good jump shooting, but they just have the skill. They're really, really impressive. So that's why NC State moves all the way up to 3. I know they lost to Virginia, but right now NC State is just playing so well. And they'll get Virginia on the road later in the year on February 24th. So that'll be a good test to see if they're as good as I think, or if they're just a little bit more flashy than Virginia. And then number 2, and we'll talk about Duke and UNC together. Earlier in the week, both of them took care of business. Duke blowing out Boston College, North Carolina blowing out Syracuse on Monday. And then they played each other. And to be honest, I kind of expected Duke to kind of run away with that. And it seemed like they would early on. First half, UNC did not look good. Caleb Wilson kind of single-handedly kept them in the game. They were down 12 at halftime, and frankly, it could have been 20 if Caleb Wilson was not doing Michael Jordan kind of stuff. Just spin move, fade away, jumpers, making them excellence in the post. I mean, he was unbelievable. He really, really stood out. I've watched them a few times, but this was maybe the half where he stood out most to me, doing it against Duke, out-dueling Cameron Boozer severely in the first half. But that would flip in the second half as Caleb Wilson kind of faded, and it was Henry Visar in the second half and Seth Tremble that brought him back, got him close. They were within 3. The crowd was incredible, unbelievable atmosphere. And I got to say, you got the big game. You got Ohio State, Michigan football. You got the Iron Bowl, which maybe has fallen back a little bit as Auburn hasn't been as good, but Auburn, Alabama in football. And then I think you got Yankees, Red Sox. And I think UNC Duke is in that mix. Those 4, I don't know what order you put them in, but those are the best rivalries. That crowd was insane. I was super impressed. And in the second half, they come all the way back to get within 3. Still seemed like Duke would hold them off. Henry Visar drills a 3-pointer to tie it. They get a stop. They call a timeout. They've got a chance to draw something up. They penetrate. Duke collapses. They kick it out to Seth Tremble, who is like the senior leader who's been there, plays great defense. He had that. He's been there 4 years, not a transfer. He had the broken forearm earlier in the year from that weightlifting accident. He's come back and elevated their perimeter defense and their scoring, drills the game-winning 3-pointers, time expires. Everyone rushes the floor, which is, I still think, a cool scene. I know Duke complained that things got violent. I didn't see it, but I'll believe them. That's not cool, not acceptable. But love that passion that's unique to college, that's not in the NBA. So love that. They actually put clock back on, and Duke got a chance with 0.4 left to inbound it, maybe get a shot off. They didn't get a shot off. And UNC beats Duke. And so they jumped from, I forgot where they were, like 6 all the way to 2. That's an incredible win. Good for them. But Duke remains 1 despite that because A, it was on the road. B, they're still tied for first at 10-1. They still have the better record. They went on the road to Cal and Stanford and beat them both, and North Carolina lost to both. So that still counts for something. They're still the highest ranked team in Ken Pom at number 3, still have the best record. And now they get maybe a good soft landing as they go. They'll take out their frustration on Pitt on the road. This should be an easy win. I think Pitt's really bad. They could even play probably a D- game and beat Pitt. And then they host Clemson. They haven't lost a home to Clemson since the 90s, but that's probably like your ACC championship right there. And obviously, the ACC championship is kind of split in basketball, which is weird. In football, obviously, no one cares who's the 1 or the 2. When you get to the championship game, the winner of that game is the champion. I would say, you hang banners for regular season championships. Clemson has 1. I would say that means as much or more to an ACC tournament championship, which Clemson's never won. But I think that Clemson-Duke game is probably your de facto championship. I could see NC State is maybe the only other team that maybe has a shot at it because they get Duke at home. I think with 3 losses, I'd be surprised if Duke loses more than 3 games. So maybe UNC goes perfect, but they still have to go to Cameron. So I think Duke versus Clemson is probably your ACC championship this week, and that should be a great game. We'll see if Clemson if their defense could slow down the talent of Duke and if their offense can keep up. But this was a fun week in the ACC. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to tell me who's your team and how did I do on these rankings? Who have I overrated? You always tell me who have I underrated. So do it again in the comments. Thanks for watching.